Welcome to the Clearly Beneficial podcast, the show where we rip off the Band-Aid and explore the future of healthcare, benefits, and the people driving innovation in the industry. This episode is brought to you by Health Next, the company leading the way in helping employers build enduring cultures of health and well-being, reducing medical cost trends, and increasing organizational performance. To learn more how they can help you, visit healthnext.com.
I'm super excited to have an old friend from a previous employer with me today, Payne of the People Company. We reconnected on LinkedIn not long ago, and I thought she'd make a great guest because her bastion of experience is in the world of HR and wellness and all those things. And she started a company with some partners to be a value-added HR partner for companies in the 100 to 5,000 employee space. So welcome, Allie.
Thanks. It's great to be here. Good to reconnect.
No, glad to have you. And so kind of let's get right into it. I mean, obviously, you felt that there was an opportunity in the HR market space for someone to add additional value than internal HR teams. So how did that genesis of you wanting to do this come about?
Yeah, I think part of the stuff that HR people do every day really is very, very broad. And I think they're spending so much time on certain things that other things don't necessarily either get taken care of or fall to the wayside. And then it's like they're always or constantly playing catch up with whatever their leaders are asking them to do. And so we said, why not be a resource to HR people at whatever point they need it, right? So they might really love doing all the compliance stuff. Great. You do that. Bring us in to do the employee experience side of things or the day-to-day HR stuff. And so it's really just because we felt like HR people are being asked to do so much more than maybe it isn't necessarily they're asked to do more, there's just more to do. So how do you make sure that they have the resources at the right time? And then how do you help them get a seat at the table? We also find that many times HR teams don't have a seat at the table. And so is there a way that we can coach them and help them figure out how do they get a seat at the table and what are they being asked from a data perspective, from a strategy perspective, from a people perspective, from an experience perspective? How can we set them up for success to have a different conversation than the traditional HR space? And sometimes we do that fractionally. Sometimes we do that by project. Sometimes we do it because they need a certain thing or they come to us for a certain reason. And then we help them explore, like, what is it that they actually need?
Okay, so let's take a step back there and let's define the table. Who's at the table?
So the table for us or the table for them?
You tell me.
I think, the table for them kind of depends on the role that they're in, right? And how the leaders of the organization see that particular HR talent, if you will. And sometimes they do have a seat at the table and they are talking about strategy, but so often the business strategy is so different than the people strategy. I mean, if you really think about this organizational strategy, we spend hours and hours talking about our business strategy and we spend zero time talking about our people strategy. And if you don't have a people strategy that can marry your business strategy, you're going to fail. And you might not fail fast, but at some point, those two things are going to come to a head and you're going to say, we don't have the right people to get us to where our business needs to go. And so taking that step back, I think that really helps organizations. So when you talk about the table, it really is, do you have the right people at your business strategy table? So are the people in the room that should be talking about your people and how you're going to actually execute on, whatever the goal is? And it doesn't matter what industry you're in, right? Like at the end of the day, your people are doing the work and AI can't solve that. You have to figure out how do you make sure you have the right people sitting at the table when you're making those business decisions and those people decisions, because they really do come together.
No, they absolutely do, and that's a great perspective. I think that HR is that function in an organization that is, I've always said it, overworked, underpaid, understaffed, least respected. I mean, and they're the ones that everyone, even how they're portrayed in the media, it's like, oh, I got called to HR. It's like this negative thing when strategically they probably play one of the most valuable parts of what an organization can do to deliver what their mission is. And
Yep.
so, you've now been at this in your company for how long?
Just over a year.
Just over a year. Wow. And so that's amazing that, and I imagine there's no shortage of work, question mark.
No, definitely not. And I think it's also just like identifying or helping an organization figure out like where do they need support. And we've had organizations call us and say, we had a full-time HR person and it just didn't work out. And, we just need someone to help us, on a day-to-day. Well, at some point in the probably first 3 months that we work with them, we're like, you actually do need a full-time HR person. You just weren't necessarily using them the way that you should have been using them. And so they're like, oh, like, thanks for pointing that out. We just didn't know how to engage with an HR person in the right way. And, maybe they didn't have the right person in the role, but they also didn't necessarily know how to engage that person in a way to help their organization move forward.
Wow. And this is this is 2026, right?
It sure is.
Well, it
Crazy.
is true. I would say the middle market middle market organizations struggle the most. As a benefits consultant for many years, I saw that group of that size employers struggled the most. And HR was always part of the conversation. And I want to get to that part of this a little bit later in our conversation. But now that you've been out doing this for a while and interacting with clients, we both know that if you've seen one client, you've seen one client. You walk in the door, you have a conversation, you do a needs assessment, and then you're there for 6 weeks or 4 to 6 weeks, and you're going, the scope of work was this, but they really need this, right? So give me some. Obviously the names are changed to protect the innocent, but I mean,
Yeah.
maybe if you're comfortable giving some examples of those type of scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times we get called because they have a specific issue, right? Or they know that we do HR consulting, or they know we do employee experience consulting, and so they say like, we need an engagement survey as an example. That's one that happens all the time where they're like, we don't necessarily know if our people are engaged or we feel that they're not, and so we have to figure out, how do we make sure our employees are engaged? And we get in there and we start to, talk to people or start working on strategy. And we actually find out that it's actually not the engagement strategy they need. It's actually that they need a strategy in general. And so, we have one client that said, we need an engagement strategy. And we said, okay, but let's take a step back and figure out, like, do you have the right communication strategy in place? And do you have the right resources in place? And do you understand that your people need leadership development? And so it was like, they just hadn't really thought about the employee value proposition in a way that was resonating with the employee. Like, I think, the HR team and the leadership team, like, they had a strategy, but it didn't get to the point where it was actually communicated to the employees. And so the employees were like, we don't have the right resources. Well, they did. They just hadn't necessarily been communicated in a way that was something that an employee could understand. So it was, HR jargon or things that they just were like, really not understanding. The other thing that I think happens a lot is an organization will end up having really high turnover. And so they'll say, well, we have a turnover issue and we don't, we think it's because, we're not hiring the right people. And we really, once we get in there and we find out it isn't necessarily your hiring, it's that you're showing up as something different than who you hired. So when you hire your people, what you say on the outside has to match what's actually happening on the inside. And a lot of times there's a huge disconnect there where, it says we do this, but actually these people are getting hired for that. And they're like, this isn't the experience that happened during my interview process. Like, what happened? Like, what happened from point A to point B? And so helping them redetermine, like, what does the employee experience really look like after they get hired? And what is the strategy around helping someone feel like they have a career path? A lot of organizations, it's shocking to me that if you ask a millennial or a Gen Z, what's their number one, it's generally career development, right? Like, they want to know where they're going. And, employers, particularly older employers, will say like, oh, the millennials, all they want to do is figure out how do they get to CEO in the first year of their employment. And I actually don't think that's actually happening. I think that's what the people hear. It's really just like, how are you going to help me get better at whatever I'm doing? And some organizations are like, well, I don't want to train them because then they're just going to leave. Well, that's a bigger issue, right? And so we uncover that a lot too, where they say, we don't want to train them because then, Johnny Appleseed down the street is going to, pluck them from my organization. Okay, well, that's a different conversation than, oh, these people are unengaged and, not showing up. So I think that's
No, yeah, those are amazing observations. And how, I mean, and how do you solve for that? I mean, it's almost like we bring you to the house. We're not going to tell you how to use the appliances, and we expect you to stay here, and with and yes, to your point about Gen Zs and millennials, sure, they want a career path, and it really is on the onus of the employer to give them that and to deliver on the promise of that employment. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think it's twofold. I think it is the employer's responsibility to make sure that they feel like they're getting opportunities, but it's also on the employee. And I see a lot of times the employee is not taking ownership over their own career development path. And the younger generations are even worse at that. But if you think about how we've raised these kids, if you will, like we have basically helped them through every step. And so they come out of college with having someone, everything from a guidance counselor at school to some sort of college coach to a career coach inside college. Like
everybody gets a trophy. Yeah.
Yes. And that is really, really affecting how these leaders help these younger generations get through their day to day because they've been handheld. And again, like I have people all the time that, Gen Z or Gen X and baby boomers, and they get so upset with these younger employees. And I'm like, do you have kids? Like, think about how you've raised your kids. Like that's what's really happening is that they have been in this environment where we give them this, everyone gets something, right? And that's just not how they show up that's not how you show up at work. Like, not everyone gets the same raise and not everyone gets the same opportunity. Like, you have to be a what I would call a go-getter if you're going to be successful in an organization today. Like, no one is going to hold your hand and pull you along. And the other crazy thing, which I don't necessarily know, Vinny, that we talked about this before, but there was a Forbes article last May that came out, and it was talking about the number of parents that are showing up to job interviews.
And oh my God, I didn't see that.
It was it was a crazy article. And it was like the statistic was 43% of employers are saying that when they get interviews with young talent, like new, fresh out of college, that parents are showing up, whether it's an online, a video interview or it's an in-person, their parents will come with. Or it'll be like you and me sitting here, right? And then my mom is sitting over here in the corner, like whispering in my ear.
That's mind blowing to me.
Right?
I mean, I hadn't heard that before. I mean, I remember a million years ago, this is now 35 years ago, not 30 years ago, when my son was playing t-ball. And it would annoy me in t-ball, and then the dads would stand on the field behind the kid. I'm like, wait a second, this is not what we should be doing here. The kids, right? let them fall on their own faces. But it's so fascinating that we're seeing this as generational trends, and me as a baby boomer, honestly, I don't want to believe it. Right? You read it and you go, this can't be true, right?
Yeah. I know, it's so true. It was crazy. That same week, I happened to be speaking in Marshalltown, Iowa. So, kind of middle of nowhere, Iowa. I read the article that morning, went to do the presentation for the group, and it was a group of 19 to 20 employers in Marshalltown, Iowa. And I was like, I'm going to test this theory because the Forbes article was, New York City and LA, and that was where those employers were from. And so I asked the audience of 19, I think it was 19 or 20 employers, I said, have any of you had, parents alongside when you do job interviews? And 6 hands went up. They had, even in Marshalltown, Iowa. I thought in Iowa, that can't possibly happen, right? And so they were like, oh yeah. And then they all told the story of what had happened. And it was everything from like somebody sitting on a Zoom call to someone actually showing up for the job interview. And so the other people in the audience were saying, well, what did you do? And she said, I had to tell the parent they had to go sit in the car. Like, I wasn't going to even let them sit in our waiting room. Like, they had to leave. So yeah, it's happening.
But it's, we look at, we look at organizations, I think, from a very analytical perspective. You from HR, me from benefits, and we see the things that need to get done in our minds because we come at it from a very practical perspective. Well, it's a little different for people who generationally have had everything handed to them, all the things you just said, but also employers have to adapt for better or for worse. The tree's only going to bend so far,
Right.
and so if you're dealing with that, you actually have to address it and have a strategy that makes sense in order for that to go forward, right?
Yep. Yeah, for sure. When thinking about that, where will you bend and where won't you bend? And how do you make sure that your leaders, that's the other thing, is that our leaders are really not prepared for this type of conversation, right? Like they're not ready. Like they're assuming they're hiring someone and that person can step in day one and they're going to train them for whatever they're doing and then they're going to go. And that's not how the world is working right now. And so how do you help your leaders adapt to having the younger generation join you, and what are you going to have to do to train a Gen X, a Gen Z, a millennial? Like how are you going to have to train them differently? And I'm not saying that you have to throw everything up, but you still have to figure out how do you adapt, and then how do you adapt each personalization, right? Because if you think about our world is personalized. Everything we do now is personalized. Thank you, AI. But that is something that a lot of organizations have just not adapted to, or even like been okay with, because we have tried to hold on to what we've always done and what we've always known. And that shift has really, it is here, it is now. And if you're not willing to adapt quicker than maybe what you were before, like you are going to lose that talent just as fast as you get them, because they're not going to wait around.
So that begs another topic, and you said it a few seconds ago, the rise of AI. And I look at it, and obviously the algorithm on Instagram and LinkedIn thinks I need to be taking AI courses because that's all I've been seeing in the last week, right? I mean, it's just like intense. I mean, every platform wants to teach me about AI.
Right.
And that's not to say I haven't used AI for any number of tasks. I had it build a slide deck for me yesterday. I mean, it does cool things, but you read in the news now, I mean, if you look at the push-pull going on as organizations try to understand AI, I think some of them would just be happier getting rid of employees and turning a whole bunch of routine workflows over to AI as much as possible, because it is pretty remarkable. I'm in a white collar role, whether it's in insurance, I'm an attorney. I mean, there are things I'm still going to need to do as a human.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much of the stuff that I did before that an AI can do for me. And so that is an inflection point right now that we're at. And what do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we can get organizations to understand how AI can help their business, I think it can help their humans be more efficient. And so I think a lot of this is you're seeing organizations, cut employees that AI can take over. I don't necessarily know that had the business thought about how they were going to execute on some of the things that come at the same time, and that efficiency. So how do you help your teams get more efficient using AI? That's really, I think, where we can continue using AI in a way that isn't necessarily going to just eliminate jobs. But you're right, there are some jobs that AI probably will swallow up, if you will. But it's really about that relationship. So it doesn't matter it doesn't matter what industry you're in. AI will affect every industry. I know I've talked to some of my healthcare friends and they're like, oh, AI is not gonna do anything to us. And I'm like, it will at some point, it will affect you. You might not be feeling it today, but at some point it will definitely affect the business, even inside healthcare. And I think if organizations and employees, so again, when I talk about this ownership thing, like I need to own my own growth and development just as much as my employer does. And if we can get that mindset to be like curious learners every single day, I think that AI will support and help most employees versus it being this like super negative and taking over the world. Like that seems to be
Well,
what we're
there's
hearing.
this notion that, the way I kind of see it is that, the AI can dish up information to you and do and automate workflows and do any number of things. But there is, in everything we do, there's the last mile,
Yeah.
right? And the last mile is that touch point where something has to get done from human to human. Okay. Not everything is automated.
No.
And my wife's in the interior design industry, and we always joke that, the plumbers, electricians, and all the people that actually do the installs, those are AI proof jobs, but at the same time, I've kind of had a talk a few weeks ago with a guy he used to work at another large insurance brokerage. And in the course of about 20 minutes, we sort of deconstructed the role of an insurance brokerage and recognized that AI can probably handle about 95% of the work. I mean, it's going to get to the point where even the AI is going to be able to go to Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois and get a quote for health insurance, and
That's
all of a
right.
sudden, and then do the analysis of which plan is the best value-oriented plan. I mean, I've tried this experiment where I type stuff into Chat GPT, giving it an employer scenario, and it spits out a strategy that I would have come up with and then some,
Right.
So brokers need to be, I mean, I think the brokerage industry is really going to undergo one industry, one that's near and dear to our hearts,
Yeah.
that I can see that that's going to be an industry going through tremendous upheaval. And maybe the timing is right, because a lot of the OG brokers, me included, are no longer either brokering, or they're not going to train. We should care, but no one's being paid to care.
Yeah.
So we're just hiring these young people, throwing them to the wind and saying, slapping them on the butt and saying, "Go get him, Tiger."
Right.
And that speaks to your thing about, not, showing up and it not being what you thought it would be.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think AI in general is a good thing. And I think if employees embrace it, and even employers embrace it, right? Like I remember when ChatGPT first launched, and the employer I was at the time was like, whoa, no one can use ChatGPT. Like, we cannot let our people use it because we don't know what it will do. Right. And it was like at the time, people, all they were doing was helping them create writing an email. Right. So it was like very, very elementary things that they were using it for, but it was such the old people in the room, and not necessarily old, but just like hadn't necessarily been exposed to ChatGPT at the time, were like freaking out because they were like, we don't know what this is going to be, and we don't know what it'll do to us, and we don't know if it'll get in our computers and like mess up all our stuff and steal our stuff. And so it was, it's just like all this fear. And I was like, well, we got to be curious about it, right? Because if we don't figure it out, like the younger people coming in are not afraid to try and use it, right? And the organization actually cut off the chat, and this was just Chat GPT. I mean, this was like the inception of it. They literally cut off all access to people. You had to fill out this form on what you were going to use it for and how you were going to use it for it to even be okay to be on your laptop. It was really crazy. And I think the organizations who are willing to figure out how do they use it in a way that's going to support them, and the broker is a great example of, one that you are going to have to rethink your relationship with your clients if you're only relying on the work that you do, because the work that you're doing in spreadsheets and all that can be done by someone else, and it doesn't have to be done by a human. It can be done,
absolutely. I mean, I think especially the small to mid-size, the smart small to mid-size brokers, if they're innovative and want to adopt this technology, they could get very big very fast by being willing to not be overpriced in the marketplace. They can have economies of scale. There's so many things. I mean, I'm just too damn old to launch that company, right?
Yeah.
But I can absolutely positively see it happening, because we both know all the I mean Gallagher right now, and I'll throw them under the bus for a second, but I mean, they're now well over a 10 billion, maybe $15 billion annual revenue company, and so with all these big acquisitions they've made, and they're bringing on all these people, but the leaning will begin at some point in my mind. So one area I really wanted to talk to you about is, as you see, the conversation with your clients and the HR space, and something that's certainly comfortable for me to talk about, is that relationship of that HR person with, not with the broker necessarily, but with the notion of employee benefits. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to set up a premise here, and I'd like to get your opinion on what I'm saying here. And that is, I maintained for many years that HR, and I'm just, forgive me for saying these words, but HR really can't do math. Okay. And I've validated this in front of CFOs. I'm like, well, so the broker comes in and delivers the renewal to HR. You're not in the room, Mr. CFO, even though you should be. HR gets the renewal, big spreadsheets, big binders, all the things. Broker does their dance. HR remembers about 10% of what broker told them. Then they tell you, and then if the renewal was a low renewal, everybody pops bottles and it's okay. If it's a 10% renewal, it's still okay because you, Mr. CFO, wrongfully budgeted 10%, and then if it's 15% or more, heads got to roll. And so I maintain to this day, and because I haven't seen it, I've not seen, especially in the mid-market, a good example of this yet, where an HR team and a CFO team, finance team from the same company partnered together to build a sustainable health strategy in concert with their broker. So tell me if you've seen that.
I have not. And I think it kind of is, it's like they're never at the same table together, right? It's like they're not necessarily thinking about it the same way. And so the CFO is thinking about it from a money perspective and the HR person is thinking about it from a people perspective. And it's like they cannot figure out how to come together.
They're speaking past each other, I think, all the time.
Yeah, they are. And it's like, how do you get them to really understand what both, because you got to have both, right? It's not like you can do it one or the other. And I don't necessarily know that even the brokers are helping that relationship being built, right? Because they're not necessarily giving the HR team enough of an understanding as to why the finance people need to be in their room, and vice versa, right? And so it's a battle that I feel like, you've been in this business longer than I have, but it's like a constant battle of, do I really need to understand it or do I not? I actually have a city client, a fairly large city, and they do a better job of it. But I think it's because they don't have anyone in HR that's a benefit expert. So they kind of have to rely on the finance team to help them. And so that'd be the closest that I've seen it. But then the funny thing about that is their broker's not in the room, right? So the broker is not involved in those conversations. Those are happening really in the culture work we're doing. And then it's like getting back to the broker, but not necessarily in the way it probably should be.
Yeah. I feel it's shame on everybody. I mean, when I started in the industry in the early 2000s, when a health premium for a single person was about $150, and a family was $450, a 10% increase on that was nominal. Now you've literally added a zero across the board, worth $1,000 for a premium to insure someone, and finance is still not building the bridge with HR. And I don't blame HR for this, to be honest with you. I really blame, and I pull up a study somewhere that shows what percentage of benefits is the percentage of payroll, how that's crept up over the years. And if companies are going to really be mindful of cost, because a lot of the stuff you're working on has a cost, but at the same time, it's not necessarily a hard cost, as benefits are a hard cost. Right? Benefits are one of the hardest costs that a company has to eat, because if benefits get too expensive, people don't get raises, products don't get developed, marketing doesn't get budget, all those things. So where do you see this going?
Where do I see the relationship kind of going?
How can we improve? What can we say to the market? What can you say to the marketplace? What can you say to HR people, that can improve, that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think just understanding really what you need and what you don't need. I think that's the other thing, right? Where we're spending so much money in the benefit space that is medical insurance coverage expensive? Yes, 100%. But you've got all this other stuff that in some cases is just noise, right? Like, all these point solutions that are out there that people are buying, I always say, like, please do not spend any more stuff. Even though, like, a salesperson called you and said, you need this and you need that, like, just stop and take a step back and really understand what you have today so that you can actually think about what do your people really need. And that's a lot of the times we get hired is at that point, right? Where they're like, I have all this stuff. And my people don't know about it because I've really not done a great job communicating it. And I haven't really thought about what my people really need. I just think about it through my own lens. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like your HR people usually have a pretty good tap on what your people are asking for, or what they need. But so many times we never go back and we say, okay, of all these things we offer, are people using it? Is it providing the value that it should be providing? Do my people know about it? Should I be rethinking the relationship that I have with the vendor? Or is it the vendor's fault that maybe it's not working? You got to ask yourself that too, where a lot of times I see employers spending money on vendors where their relationship is terrible and they're just going through the motions. And it's like, whoa, like it could be a lot easier if you just cut it off and stop doing it. And you might have 2% of your population even notice that vendor's not around anymore, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, if you go back to what I like to jokingly call the original point solution, which is the EAP, right? I mean, before COVID, the EAP had maybe 2% utilization.
So true.
And a lot of employees didn't even know what it was or where it was. And of course, that's something you touched on earlier is, it's the fault of organizations that poorly communicate poorly with their employees when they give them that 85-page, PDF for annual open enrollment and say, here you go. I've done my job. Knock yourself out, buddy. And then, and then, by the way, don't call anybody. We're not going to do an open enrollment meeting. Don't call anybody because you just go to the portal and enroll yourself.
Yes.
God help us all, and so you just touched on something. You used that, the V word, the vendor word. And we, when before we turn the cameras on here, we talked a little bit about that. And kind of the last thing I want to kind of chat with you about is this notion of vendors and this process that organizations think, and whether it's looking to replace a broker or evaluate it, some people just jump through hoops for the sake of jumping through hoops. They're not assessing their own time involved in the evaluation, and then the 5 vendors they want to have involved in the evaluation. Have you felt that there's what's the better strategy? What are the strategies that an organization are questioning a broker? Let's pick on brokers for a second. So if they're questioning the relationship with their broker, what's the first thing they should do?
Well, I would say have a pretty, good sit down with the broker to figure out like what exactly are they doing. I think so many times, and I'm not sure why this happens. So I don't necessarily know if I'm answering your question, but I'm just gonna say this because I think it needs to be said. So many times the broker thinks their value lies within doing RFPs. So they're like, I'm going to do an RFP for you for a new vendor for whatever point solution it is, right? So instead of, again, taking a step back and saying, what's actually working and what's not working and why is it not working before we go through the exercise of doing an RFP, right? And the RFP takes everyone so much time, right? It's not like an RFP is done overnight. An RFP takes a lot of time. And a lot of times people answer the RFP or they even get the RFP and they don't even know who the client is, right? They're just like, yeah, we're going to answer this RFP. And then they're like, oh, well, that was really a waste of my time, energy, and money because I don't have even a relationship. And so I think the broker who feels like they have to do an RFP every year, and I'm not just talking medical RFPs, I'm talking like any RFP, right? And I know there's a team for an organization we used to work for, and their entire well-being and engagement team, all they do is RFPs all day long.
Yeah.
I'm like, that cannot be fun. No one likes doing RFPs, answering them or reading them or analyzing them. And then at the end of the day, they get to doing all the analysis that took someone 100 hours. And they're like, yeah, we're just going to stay with who we have today. Oh, great. So again, like thinking about that relationship and what's working today versus what you think you should have, like start with just a conversation. My goodness, like don't put everyone through the ringer just because you feel like you need to add more value.
No, I absolutely agree with you, and that especially when the HR team doesn't feel the broker is performing. I agree with you 100%. Have that sit down, and if in that sit down you do uncover the 3 things that they literally cannot deliver on, whether it's strategy, it's day-to-day service, or frankly they're charging too much,
right?
You should know, and this is kind of a bugaboo as well. I mean, what percentage of HR people actually know what they're paying their brokers the work that they're doing?
Good question. Because I would guess it's pretty low.
Always shocking to me. And at least when we worked at Gallagher, we did a compensation disclosure on the front of every annual, renewal.
Yep.
Even that didn't tell the full story of how much we got paid. It took every line of coverage and said the percentages we got paid. I can't tell you how many people, whether it's HR or CFOs, tell me as I'm talking to them, potential client, well, I don't even know what I pay my broker. And I just happen to have the 5,500 with me. And I'll go, well, here's your latest 5,500 and it's $250,000 or whatever the number was. And they're appalled by that. I'm like, you didn't know that? And in fact, I could be literally sitting across the table from the person whose signature is on the 5,500 and they didn't know what's in there.
Yeah. Well, and on top of that, so then you peel back the onion, right? And you figure out like, oh, well, they're not doing this, they're not doing this, they're not doing this. And they say like, okay, well, now we need to hire an outside consultant to fill in these gaps, right? And so the brokers are so ingrained in commission business that they don't even want to do like project fee work because they make so much money on the commission stuff. They're like, we don't need to do project work. Well, at some point, I have a feeling they're probably going to have to figure out how do they incorporate some project-based work to actually close that value gap.
No, well, listen, I mean, when I was doing what I was doing, full time, I was, I would, especially my largest clients, I would net out all the commissions and come up with a monthly fee and just call it that. I would take commissions on voluntary products, but I wouldn't take commissions on core lines of coverage. And I would come up with a number that made sense for everybody. And the smart brokers would do more of that. I think when brokers start to prospect new business, they look at a company and say, oh, look at the commissions in that. I want to go after that. But the truth is they should ignore that and really come up with a value prop that makes sense for the client. So,
yeah. But I think
I want to wrap this up. I want to thank you. Anything else you wanted to add or say to this conversation?
No, I mean, I love the conversation. I love this, like, how do we do benefits and HR different? Like, that's our whole thing, right? Is we believe that there is going to be and has to be change in this industry. And we believe helping your HR teams get smarter, faster, and fitter. That's kind of the thing that we just think is such an important element to helping organizations grow. Because again, your 50 employee group is going to grow at some point, hopefully.
Oh, for sure. Oh, my dog just showed up. He's going to show up in the episode. That's Murphy. Anyway, so good. My last question is nothing related to anything we talked about. Are you a wine drinker?
Yeah, I like to dabble in some wine once in a while.
And so what's your favorite?
Probably a Barolo from Italy.
Barolo. Oh, all right. You're a girl after my own heart. I love a good.
Yeah.
Is that your favorite type of wine?
Yeah, I'm gonna consider myself not a good drinker in that I usually am like, whatever you're ordering, I'll have too. I'm just not I like red for sure. So one of my really good friends, she's a Barolo gal. And so that's what she always orders. So I'm like, I could do this.
Well, she's breaking you in well, because that's actually one of my favorites as well. So listen, that's great. Well, Allie, thank you so much for being with us today. It was a pleasure to get your perspective and all these things. And we'll hopefully have you back and cover some additional topics as we go down the road.
All right. Thanks so much, Vinny. I really appreciate you having me.
This podcast reflects the personal views of the host and guests, not their employers or sponsors. See you next time.